Hey everybody, it's Brad here with Enble Technologies. Today I'm going to talk about some best practices that you should use to protect your mail server. Now, a lot of these concepts will apply no matter what type of mail server you're using, but some of these are specific to Security Gateway. So, which you can use to protect any type of mail server, whether that be an Exchange server, Office 365, Curio, or any of the other mail servers that are out there. I've recently also created an updated how-to guide and best practices guide that discusses all of these steps in a little bit more detail. So you'll find that information on our website at mdamon.com under the support tab by clicking on literature. You'll find it on that page. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and go through these 15 best practices tips for protecting your mail server. Now the first tip I have is to make sure a user is valid before creating an account. And this applies specifically to Security Gateway. So Security Gateway, when it's protecting your mail server, it will look for inbound or outbound mail to or from the local domain that Security Gateway is protecting. And if it does not yet recognize the address, then it will query what we call a user verification source to verify that the account is actually an active, valid account. So it will query, for example, Active Directory, Office 365. It'll query mdaemon via the userlist.dat file, an LDAP source, or any other various other data source types. So you'll find that information in Security Gateway under the Setup Users menu, under Accounts, and then under User Verification Sources. So here under User Verification Sources, I can see all of my user verification sources here, and I can create new ones. So for example, if I click on the new button here, and I'm protecting say an Office 365 domain, I can come here under the Type drop-down menu and select Office 365 and then put in the required information below. Same thing applies if you are protecting an Exchange server. You can query an Active Directory data source and validate accounts through Active Directory. You also have options for verifying against an LDAP data source, or simply using an SMTP call forward command or process to verify accounts that way. So this will allow you to make sure that an account is actually legitimate on the mail server before that account is created in Security Gateway. The second recommendation I have for you is to use SMTP Authentication to prevent unauthorized account access. In Security Gateway, you'll find the SMTP Authentication settings under the Security menu here, under Anti-Abuse, and then SMTP Authentication is located right here. Make sure this box is checked to indicate that authentication is always required when mail is from local accounts. We also recommend that the box down here, Mail from Postmaster, Abuse, and Webmaster, requires authentication. Make sure this box is checked as well. These are addresses that are commonly spoofed by cybercriminals. They know that most domains or many domains are likely to have an email address under that domain using Postmaster or Abuse or another common address such as those. So make sure that you are requiring authentication for those as well. And then my third recommendation is to make sure that you are requiring strong passwords from your users. Now that will be configured on the mail server or Active Directory or your database. My next suggestion is to use dynamic screening to prevent suspicious activity, such as somebody trying to connect too many times in a given time frame, somebody trying to guess passwords and failing authentication a given number of times in a given time frame. You'll find the dynamic screening settings located in Security Gateway right here. So make sure this box is checked to enable dynamic screening, and then you configure various parameters such as banning IPs that cause a failed number of RCPT attempts. In other words, those are protocol commands that indicate a recipient when they're trying to send email, and if they're just populating the to field with a bunch of random email addresses, or they're just guessing. So a given number of those in a given time frame indicates that somebody's trying to abuse your system. So you can block that type of activity. You can also block IPs that fail a given number of authentication attempts by checking this box right here and entering a value in the blank provided. So again, somebody trying to guess passwords for an account, that activity can be blocked. You can also optionally block IPs that send a given number of RSCT or reset commands. Cybercriminals will often do this to try to keep a connection open, to buy them more time to try to hack into your system or guess passwords or do other types of perform other types of abuse. The next tip is to enable account hijack detection, which again you'll find in Security Gateway right down here under the anti-abuse section of the security menu. And what this does is if an account manages to send a given number of messages through Security Gateway in a given period of time, then Security Gateway can disable that account or freeze the account and then notify the administrator. The idea behind this is that if a hacker manages to guess the password of one of your users and they start sending out a bunch of spam, this feature will block that type of activity once it detects that a given number of messages have been sent in a given period of time. So it helps prevent account takeovers. It'll notify the administrator, and at that point you can go in and either have the user change their password, change it yourself on your user verification source, notify the user, disable the account. So we'll check this box to enable the account hijack detection feature, and then tell it how many messages we will accept in a given time frame. So for example, if 50 messages are sent in 15 minutes, then that might indicate a possible hijacked account, and Security Gateway can take corrective action and disable the account. My next recommendation is to make sure that you have configured at least one default mail server in Security Gateway. So when Security Gateway receives an email for a particular domain that it is protecting, it needs to know where to send that email. So in Security Gateway, you can associate domains with specific mail servers. For those domains that have not been assigned a particular mail server, then the default mail server will be used. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. In Security Gateway, if we go to the Setup Users menu located right here, and under Mail Configuration, we have the Domain Mail Servers configuration screen. Currently, I'm protecting 2 mail servers. So, for example, if I select the first one, this particular mail server is protecting the domain example.com as indicated down here. So, if we do not specify a particular domain for this mail server to protect, then we can designate it as a default mail server. And you can do that by checking this box right here. And I have another one configured like that. So the second option I have, the second mail server I'm protecting here, for example, this is a default mail server. Notice it has not been assigned any domains in particular that it is protecting. So mail that arrives for domains that have not yet been designated, have not been assigned a particular mail server, they will go to the mail server indicated here. The next tip I have is to prevent unauthorized mail relaying. Now, relaying is basically where your mail server delivers mail that is neither from nor to a local account. And a common tactic used by spammers is to send mail through these mail servers, send spam out through these mail servers that are open relays, that are relaying mail. So if you are one of those relaying mail, that's a good way to end up on a blacklist. So we want to prevent that type of activity. By default, Security Gateway does not relay mail. Those relay settings are located here under the Security menu, under Anti-Abuse, Relay Control. And as you can see here, Security Gateway does not relay messages by default. You can configure a few exceptions, but I would recommend being very careful with these exceptions and do not use them unless you absolutely have to. But this concept applies to any mail server, whether that be MDaemon or Exchange or any other type of mail server. You'll want to make sure that that particular mail server is not allowed to relay mail. My next recommendation is to use IP shielding to designate which IP addresses are allowed to send mail on behalf of your domain. This feature is located in Security Gateway under the Anti-Abuse section of the security menu located right here. And the way it works is, if Security Gateway receives an email from a domain that you have assigned an IP address to, it will make sure that that email had originated from an authorized IP address. And if it had not, then the message can be rejected. This is another layer of protection against abuse and spoofing. So you can check this box here to enable IP shielding, and then you can create a new IP shield by clicking the new button right here. The idea, though, is if you use your local domain or any of your local domains, and then you specify what IP addresses are allowed to send for that domain. So, for example, the local clients on your local network, for example, then Security Gateway will reject those that did not come from authorized IP addresses. Of course, you can make exceptions for those who are sending mail from outside of your local network by making an exception for those using SMTP authentication. So that setting is located down here. If you check this box, you can exclude messages from authenticated sessions. So it's just another way of adding another layer of protection for your domain to protect against abuse and spoofing. The next recommendation I have is to enable SSL to ensure data privacy. So SSL works by encrypting the connection between a client and a server or between two servers. And in Security Gateway, you'll find those settings under the Setup Users menu, located right here. And then go to the System menu and expand it, and you'll find encryption located right here. And this is where you can enable SSL and start TLS for SMTP and HTTPS. So in other words, email transmissions will be encrypted and web connections. So when you're logging into Security Gateway, for example, using the web interface, those connections will be encrypted as well using SSL. Of course, these settings apply to any other type of mail server. You want to make sure that you are encrypting the connection so that the information cannot be intercepted by a third party while the data is in transit. My next recommendation is to enable backscatter protection. Now, backscatter consists of out-of-office autoresponders, non-delivery reports, undelivered mail reports, mailer daemon messages, and auto-replies and things like that that were sent to your users in response to messages that they never sent in the first place. That happens because spammers will rarely use their own email address to send mail. They will typically forge the return path or the from header in all of their spam messages. Now, when the return path is forged and that return path happens to be the email address of one of your local accounts, then that particular user could possibly receive the out-of-office autoresponders, the non-delivery reports, and things like that in response to messages that they did not send in the first place, and that is known as backscatter. Backscatter protection works by inserting a special key or code into the return path of all outbound mail. And then when Security Gateway or MDaemon, for example, receives a bounce back message, it will look for that special key or code. If the code is not present, then we know that that message is actually technically backscatter and it will be rejected. So it can prevent a lot of spam, of junk, out-of-office autoresponders, and non-delivery NDR messages from appearing in your users' inboxes. Backscatter protection settings in Security Gateway are located under the Security menu, Anti-Spam, and then Backscatter protection settings are located right here. So you simply check this box to enable backscatter protection, and then you can reject messages that fail backscatter protection verification. And you can find a lot more information about how backscatter protection works by clicking on the Help button up here in Security Gateway. My next suggestion is to not whitelist local addresses or local domains. Most spam comes from a forged address or a hijacked account or something similar. And if Security Gateway receives a message claiming to come from a local address, whether that be a spoofed address or not, if you've whitelisted that local address and exempted it from various security features, then that could present a possible security hole and let those messages through. So you do not want to use the whitelist to whitelist local addresses. In Security Gateway, you'll find the whitelist settings down here under the security menu, here. So just make sure that none of your domains or email addresses are listed here under the address whitelist. My next recommendation is to enable the anti-spam and antivirus outbreak protection settings, whether that be in Security Gateway or if you're using MDaemon with MDaemon Antivirus. Make sure that those settings are enabled to help protect against the latest spam and virus outbreaks. In Security Gateway, you'll find that information under the anti-spam section, under outbreak protection, and then check this box to enable anti-spam outbreak protection, which is provided by Siren. And if we scroll down, we have the option to enable antivirus outbreak protection as well. So simply check this box to enable antivirus outbreak protection. The next recommendation I have is to prevent leaks of sensitive business data. So that can be social security numbers, tax ID numbers, birthdays, account numbers, driver's license numbers, things like that, passport numbers, and so forth. Especially with all of the new regulations such as GDPR, HIPAA, various others, you'll want to be certain that leaks of confidential data do not occur. In Security Gateway, you'll find the data leak prevention settings located right down here under the main security menu. And it comes with a number of built-in data leak prevention rules. And you'll simply check the box to enable or disable the particular rule. You can edit these rules by clicking on the edit button here at the top and making changes accordingly. So for example, in Security Gateway, if a data leak prevention rule is triggered by one of your messages, by default, it's sent to the administrative quarantine, but you can use these options down here to perform other actions, such as sending it as registered mail via the rmail service, or copying it to a particular address or user, or rejecting the message, and so forth. The next tip I have is to use location screening to prevent messages from unauthorized locations or unauthorized countries. This feature is located under the security menu, under anti-abuse, and location screening right here. Simply check the box for each country that you want to block from being able to send through your server. Now, this feature is useful if you know that you do not do business with a certain region or country. There's absolutely no legitimate reason to be sending or receiving email to or from that particular country. The added benefit behind this is that this can also help block an additional surprising amount of spam, especially for spam that originates from a particular country. If a lot of spam is coming from a particular country, but you don't do business with that country, you can block messages from that country. And the final recommendation I have is to enable macro detection in Office documents. You'll find that setting in Security Gateway under Antivirus, under the virus scanning feature here. And then if we scroll down here, you can flag attachments with documents that contain macros as a virus. This is a pretty common tactic by cyber criminals. They'll send an email with an attachment like a Word document with some type of malicious macro embedded. And then they'll try to use some type of social engineering to trick you into enabling macros for that document. This is a very common method that spammers like to use, where they will pretend to be from somebody in finance or somebody from the government, requesting that you, review an invoice or a fund transfer document or various other types of documents. They will try to use that as a hook to get you to enable macros. So if a malicious macro is allowed to execute, it can do all kinds of damage to your system. It can install malware, it can install ransomware, or turn your system into a spam bot. All kinds of bad things can happen with macros if we're not careful about blocking them. So those are my top 15 recommended settings to protect your mail server. You can find the complete how-to guide with all of these steps outlined in a little bit more detail on our website at mdamon.com. Simply click on the support tab and go to literature in the drop-down menu and you'll find it there. And if you'd like to learn more about Security Gateway, you can visit securitygatewayforemail.com.